Hello everyone and most welcome to age 739. We are approaching midwinter. The midwinter solstice will happen in I think it's 2-3 days, and then we will have a turnover. We will get to brighter days. We're lucky enough to have sunshine here in Lindome, a little south of Gothenburg, in the municipality of Mölndal. Mölndal means, it's close actually to Müller and Mölle, something being grinded. I will try today to grind something down to make that stick, and I've been very careful not to write too much on the board today. The name of the lecture is Chaos and Free Will, and then we have a very short resume, the shortest resume ever of chaos theory. An approximate present leading to an approximate future. I'd say this is something that we all agree on. Even if we don't think of it, we will, when we think of it, understand that we can't know anything completely to 100% in a situation. And that is the case. But we think an approximate understanding of what is now present, this space, will approximately, because we have to remember, and we do remember, there is always some small detail that cannot be, so to speak, included in reality at this instance. It's just way beyond what's ever possible to think about. Is this true? Well, this is the tenet that we all adhere to. I don't think it matters who you speak to, but most people will agree on that. Could be a very, very few people, but I doubt there are very many people. This does not hold in chaos theory. So this could be a very good summing up of chaos theory, but we need to put this into citation marks or parentheses because it does not hold. And now the pillars that build up the world for everyone is shackling. They're beginning to vibrate and the whole edifice might break. But I wouldn't go so far to say that it breaks. It's going to become rather different, and it will actually save free will. And oddly enough, the saving of the free will doesn't come with a cost. Rather, it comes with an enormous extra bonus on top of having a free will. Because when people think about free will as well, if it's a possibility, if you don't hold on to this normal tenet in the Western world too hard, and you think there is a free will, you will think free will as something in the terms of I can make a choice. You can look at the situation ex posteriori and you see I could have made a choice there. I think that's the simplest way to approach it. Or you have a choice between taking the car or going by bus, for instance, in the morning when you go to work. You have a choice who you want to spend your life with, your career choices. You can elect between many different options. And when going to the lottery and you want to put in the 13 lines that we usually have in Sweden when it comes to the football game, and then you can choose between 1x and 2. 1 meaning the home team is winning, x means it's a draw, 2 it's the visiting team that's winning. That's what most people are hoping for, but a lot of people are despairing about. I'd say, actually, surprisingly, a lot of scientists as well. I'm just going to mention a few names. Stephen Hawking didn't really believe in this. Jacques Monod, obviously not. Steven Weinberger, he's alive and kicking to this day, does not believe in it. And neither did Carl Sagan. Why I mention these people, they are immensely influential when it comes to everyday thinking. They might not be the greatest scientist, well, Hawking definitely was one of the greatest, but they, when it comes to their influence in daily society and thinking, it's just enormous. And if you go way back, we have to add Albert Einstein without a doubt. I would show in this lecture we have a free will, but we have even more so than the thing I depicted here previously. We have a little even more. There is a bonus, as I said. It's much more than choosing between predetermined possibilities, like between taking the car or the bus. It's enormously much more. So there is a definite gain here. Let me dwell into what it is. It is nothing less than what space in itself is. And I think some of you remember phase space. Phase space is an expression coming from chaos theory. And phase space is actually both space and opportunities. One could even say that this is what space really is. Space is stretchiness, width, breadth, height, depth, but it has the traits of possibilities as well. Choices. What from a certain point of view looks like causality has a germination, a seed that is much more than causality. And this is connected to initial conditions. Remember two things here. Initial conditions determines what happens in a chaotic system. And the initial conditions are regulated by the smallest of the smallest. And that's called the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect also shows that there is a scale indifference in space. Phase space is scale indifferent in a sense. Scale is something that comes out of something being determined, but space in itself is scaleless. And this shows the importance of exactly when an effect is made on phase space is incredibly important. And then you see that time comes into the picture as well. It's not only a case about how the effect is, it's when. Let's take the example of the good old defibrillator, once mentioned and now it's going to be mentioned once more. It's not only the manner the zap is being done, that's the electrocution of the person who's suffering from some cardiac problem. It's the amount, it's the holdedness, it's the tenderness. It's incredibly important also exactly when it's made in the cycle. You see here how the individual come to play a very great role, the greatest of all, because when an effect and an intention is made, and I mean by intention the whole body system, psyche and body, not only psyche. Intention is the whole circumstance, because the holding of the zapper, the tension, the leanness, the exactness, all these gazillion factors that takes a lifetime to develop, they determine the outcome and determine it to 100%. Phase space is actually to some relata very similar to the Klein-Bottle logic. Remember Klein-Bottle logic, how it works. Action is in the phase space. Space has action. One could say that space is what's informing the participating, the deciding factor, and makes for the specific fluctuation that determines space. Now, if you are in the zone as a person, you're doing the zapping or you're doing something else, you will be closer to one single strange attractor when you are harmonious. And listen careful, that's a matter of degree. There is a lot of degrees going on here. But the more you are balanced in the strange attractor, the more you will be able to influence the result. You are deciding reality. So what you are is incredibly important in chaos theory. And how balanced you are, it's what's deciding what happens. So you see here, our regular consciousness does not play a role here. But we know that. That's the finding from Benjamin Libet. That's also the finding from quantum theory. We know that in physics, consciousness does not have any effect at all. Not even in quantum mechanics. But the whole body system, which is something completely different from the reflective consciousness, and something that most people don't have any control over, is what's deciding the whole thing. So having a free will is a matter of how elegant, how defined you are. Remember that chaotic systems are elegance. Beauty plays a role here. A circle in the stream that becomes a maelstrom, it's dependent on things that we perceive to be beautiful, which are actually literally beautiful as mathematics, as physics, because it's the beauty that is harmonious. And here, of course, the gyllene snittet comes in. And it's incredibly clever, one of those most important discoveries ever. And that is the discovery of the gyllene snittet. That harmonious systems has a deciding effect, how it's perceived as art, how it works as machinery, but also the interconnectedness between body-mind and reality. And body-mind is actually quite similar to what we used to have, that the consciousness was here, and it was fleshy consciousness. The reflective consciousness is by itself, it's built not to take part in the world. That is its structure. It looks at things after they happened. Reflective consciousness is something ex posteriori, also something that dear old Mr. Libet showed with all exactness. When we break our habitual patterns, could be the reflective consciousness or other patterns, we have what could be called a thought, a thinking. The habitual patterns are not thinking. Those are parts of the reflective consciousness, something not pertinent to what's happening in the world, because sameness does not affect any chaotic system. Sameness could be likened to directions going too much in every way. Noise or brus. And what most people have in their heads up here is something akin to pink noise or grey noise, whereas more harmonious noise, chaotic system noises, seldom occurs today among Western man. Well, then somebody would object if this would be a lecture in Götabergsgatan. Somebody would raise their hand and say, we don't have a free will there. Well, the perception of not having a free will is a true one, I would say. But reality doesn't care. Reality says that you have a free will. That's another thing. If you choose not to have a free will, of course you're not going to perceive it. As long as you are in the reflective consciousness, you've given up the steering capacity. But that does not mean that you don't have a free will. You opted not to have a free will, to be harsh. Opted in parentheses, of course. You are in a big system. Remember Edward de Bono asymmetrical thinking. What he meant with asymmetrical thinking is thinking itself. It has to be asymmetrical. Otherwise you don't have thinking, you have sameness. A shadow of the past, if you want. And oddly enough, if you go into Eastern thinking, you have an equivalent of breaking habitual patterns, and that is called intention. This is the Atma in Indian thinking. This is the Tagahata in Buddhist thinking. This is the Chin in Chinese Zen. This is the intention, that is the unbreakable individual, because a very forceful strange attractor cannot be broken. It grows because of the chaotic system. Any effect on it will make it stronger. I think this saying from Ashish could be very pertinent here, that we human beings, and I think he means the Western human beings, search for permanence, but we're looking in the wrong alley. We are looking in the alley where no permanence is to be found. We actually worsen the state of impermanence. Permanence is the chaotic system. So we know with ourselves, because we have a heart whose rhythm is completely permanent, almost unbreakable, not guided even by brain waves or anything like that, doing its own beat every day, 24 hours a day, every second, every minute. It's unbreakable, it's permanent. So we know that there is permanence, and I'm sure that Plato and Aristotle both was longing for it, but they were actually worsening the case instead. This longing for permanence is a just one. It's actually the goal of life, but it will not be found in that direction most people are going. They're going in the barking of the wrong tree, as to say. You can compare the habitual patterns, that is the reflective consciousness, to the sandbox of Edvard de Bono, where you can see that space in itself is actually telling what outcome is supposed to be. So space has a decisive factor, because how the streams, how the rivers, how the big pounding Niagara Falls in the sandbox are diverging and converging the different impressions from the world to become something that is both perception and action. And not until this is broken do you get an intention. And this is the openness. That's the open territory where you have free will. Once the breaker comes, when the pun in the joke is hitting the right timing moment, you will decide reality. So it's not choosing only between predetermined objects. You will be in command of determining the objects yourself, because determining the object is what true free will is. And being in the automatic pattern where the objects are already there, when you open up your eyes in the morning, you think the world is already decided. Of course, that's no free will there. So you see, your intention, your thinking habits are incredibly important. So it's not at all, and that's why I mentioned Carl Sagan, Jacques Monod, and Steven Weinberg, because all these three people have been propagators of the idea that we are completely without free will. But that is usually illustrated by aphorism or metaphor. Carl Sagan used to say, look at humanity, it's infinitely small, and the universe is incredibly big. That tells you you have no free will. But it's not true. Reality is scale independent. And what in that case determines reality? You could ask Carl Sagan or Jacques Monod or Steven Weinberg, if size is not of an effectual cause. Well, that is the intention. Nothing else remains. And this is actually what is meant by observer dependent in quantum mechanics. It's a bit more than a free will. And if you free will regularly thought of as free will, like choosing between different objects, it's much more. And of course, Schrödinger, I think it was said that I am God, because this is a bit more than just having a free will between different objects. Yes, this is similar to shape space. What's decided before decides what comes after, and it's the intention that is the decision that determines everything. You are in command of reality. You might not know it, and it might take a long time to integrate that to the whole system, but it is like that. So you see here, cause and effect comes afterwards. It's a bit similar to logic. Logic also comes after the discovery of an invention, a happening. Remember the pen falling to the ground. We had different cause and effects coming afterwards, ex posteriori. We had Newtonian cause and effect, then we had Einsteinian cause and effect, and then we had quantum mechanical cause and effect. Once you understand the working order of those, you will understand what these different things does. And that also open up for free will. But if you confuse ex posteriori with ex a priori, you will not have free will. So easier might be, I think this was mentioned in Jurassic Park, just a little twiddle with the finger will change the path of the drop, as he had said, one of those actors in the movie. You can think of your thinking as the little movement of the finger, and that's enough. That is what determines the whole thing. And that's a very interesting part of space. It contains object and subject. And it's a little bit like the subject wants to understand itself, and it sends its will out into the world to determine it. And by determining it, it understands itself. That's the Klein bottle turning inside and outside to the same thing. Both in 2 dimensions, area goes into area, outside goes to inside. In 3 dimension, receptacle, what is carrying the volume, goes into being the volume as well. So the scale is reoccurring. The scale independency is very important to understand, but that's where the intention comes in. If you have scale dependency or believe in it, you will not see human will as important. You will see the world as Carl Sagan did, because when he says that humanity is very small, what he says, there is a scale dependency and size matters in the universe. That's what he's implying. And therefore, an approximate reality does not include human beings or our will. It cannot without thinking, because generalize the whole world, make it an approximate starting point, initial condition, then the next future event won't be affected by human will, or in a degree that's so small that it's completely negligible. That is not true at all. And I think this crushes the idea of Carl Sagan, Jacques Monod, and Steven Weinberger in this exact moment. They haven't read chaos theory or understood it, how important that is. And scale independency is a feature of the world. There is no space in the Newtonian sense in the big equation of quantum mechanics. There's none at all. Neither is time in the Newtonian sense, and that shows that intention is what determines everything in the world. So you see here, the saying means a little bit more than you think. It doesn't mean that only that we are very small looking into the universe. It means that we don't have a choice. We are not part of reality, our own reality. Thank God that is killed off by chaos theory completely. We don't have to think that we take all the passenger seat and the world is driving by us. The world is not done by itself like a big machinery, and this also turns down the truth of human beings being infinitely small and insignificant. Rather ghastly to have that broadcasted into your brain while we were quite young. I think I was like 10 or 11. And I realized today first, I think, although it didn't give me despair at the moment, I thought this could give yourself despair. This could give someone else despair, and it did. But I later, now at the mature age, I come to realize it had actually an effect in an indirect way. That became something true in the sense of generalized physical truth. And much later, in my case, they came to be very decidable for what I thought about the world. So these things that have been propagated by Carl Sagan, Monod, and Weinberger does have an effect. It's not unimportant. Yes, their intention didn't matter, but their whole bodily system did matter. And I'd say they had an unbalanced, disharmonious body-mind complex, one on each of them. That's the only effect you can have on the world. You could be harmonious, and what you self want will happen, or you can be disharmonious, not having a strange attractor which builds up the phase space, and then the effect would be comparable. So this is the interesting feature about phase space. Also, one gets incredibly amazed how beautiful space is. It's not this cruel, horrible thing that I depicted, or even I came to believe in the end, just objects everywhere. And the idea that we can choose between these objects and nothing else. That's nothing short to slavery, I'd say. So it's a mindset not affecting the world. It's not a part of the world itself. So the disbalance, the amnesia, the lack of good use, the miscoordination, that is passivity in reality. Passivity is just the expression of bad use. Then when you don't work, you sit down and you just look. But think about a coin toss. How you toss the coin, your very intention, the finest minute details, and every human being is in this aspect very, very different. That is the butterfly effect in a coin toss, and it will drop to either side depending on what your intention is. Although you might not know what your intention is, you don't, because of the reflective consciousness, have access to all those things. But that will decide how the coin drops. But if you are unbalanced, if you're coarse and your hand movement is gross, that will turn the coin into something that is not part of a strange attractor. It will be like a defunct heart, a fibrillating heart. So the curvature of the penny or the Swedish 1 crown won't be harmonious, and the outcome will not be intentional to the same way. So you see here, whether you're balanced or not will decide if you send over a little part of the strange attractor, the harmonious, permanent system, to the coin or not, or to other people, or to what else you are actually doing in the world. I'd say this is pretty close to what Alexander called to have a clear intention, because that goes with the body, how you move it. That could be developed. Clear intention is thinking. And once you experience that, as Alexander said, he did that with his training, you think for the first time. And that is a thinking that leads to effect, leads to that you are prolonging your back before you do anything, and that is powerful intention that brings in the whole body and places consciousness in your body and makes you a conscious being. You are not a conscious being otherwise. You are the reflective consciousness, the zombie, the person who just takes the spectator seat or the passenger seat in a world that moves by itself. And you look at it ex posteriori and you say to yourself, everything was decided from the beginning, and so will also the future be. You see the difference here? It's quite amazing, chaotic theory. It should have come up earlier. I think around about that, this is way too interesting. I say thank you very much and have a most pleasant afternoon. This is definitely something to ponder about. Bye bye for now.